Do, 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 do. I think we're doing it. All righty. Welcome to Project 3, the Tonal Painting Project. Right here from the start, I'm going to talk you guys through tonight on how to concept for these pictures, what my process looks like, how to generally start thinking about painting these things. And right now, we've got a reference image up on the screen. And whenever I'm coming up with an idea, I've got a loose idea inside of my head. Before I'd like to even start sketching, I want to go out there on the internet and start looking for images. So if I've got a barn within my shot, or I think, hey, I want to have a tent, then I'll type in like desert tent to Google because I don't really know all the intricacies of like what desert tents look like. And then that might lead me to another idea, like a barn within the desert, an old barn structure. And then I'm looking for interesting structures for like barns and things like that. So I landed on this guy. I think there was another one in here. Where'd it go? Looked up crazy statues as well. But yeah, that's a pretty cool barn structure that I would have otherwise never thought of myself. So that's where that becomes helpful. But once you've got your series of reference images and you're starting to barrel down into what your idea and your concept is going to be, here is how I want you to use those reference images. I always recommend that you work from digital illustrations. Photographs are good for forms and shapes, but if you're studying right now, you're trying to get better at digital illustration. So it's going to help you the most to be able to use other artists' digital illustrations to be able to understand how they did their brush strokes, how they did their painting, their layering, their shadows, their lighting. Photographs are cool, but digital painting's even better because the artist is using all the tools in their toolkit for composition and lighting and moving the viewer's eye through the composition in incredible ways that, you know, you have to have a full photography studio set up to be able to get some of this looking at this level. And this is just an incredible shot from Game of Thrones and the Three-Eyed Raven. And there's Bran the Builder. Now, when we're painting these, you're going to be not using outlines on the characters. So if you're thinking like Bob's Burgers or anime or anything that has lines on the outside of it, that's not what we want. We want characters without lines, scenes without. This does have line in it, but you know what I mean. It's more painterly. And to begin, you're going to start by blocking in your colors. I don't want you guys to try and block these colors. It's black and white, but these tones. And I don't want you to block these tones in out of your own head. Use your reference images to be able to do this. And it's totally okay if your reference image is in color because we have Photoshop. And from there, I'm going to go through, I'm going to go to adjustments under image, drop down, adjustments, desaturate, or you can hit Control Shift U on your keyboard. And suddenly we have this same painting in black and white. Look how nice that still is reading in black and white. And what you want to start with within these paintings is the middle tone or the middle value here. I'm just going to, we'll see if this up a little bit more. There we go. All right. So I always like working from a middle gray background, not white, not black, to be able to save my eyes when I'm working. And what I'm looking for within this painting on the left-hand side is going to be the middle tone and the middle value. Seems easy enough, but let's go be detectives and try to figure out where that is. If you've never done this before, here is how my eyes see it. Where your eyes are going to be drawn to first within a composition like this is going to be the brightest area that I've just circled in red. That is what the artist wants you to look at. That's the spotlight, the main stage, the main event. That's where the artist is trying to draw your attention to. Oftentimes, let's go to another color. From that spotlight, the shading is going to start to fall off in interesting ways, right? So there it is. We've got a secondary light where the shade is starting to sort of dissipate from there into the rest of the scene. Now, when you're picking that first middle tone, you do not want to start from your highlight. You're looking, sort of on the outer skirts of where that highlight is, sort of like this, right? So in the orange region is where we're going to be able to most of the time find our middle tone. And that is exactly where we're going to be able to discover it. So the middle tone within this piece is really kind of this color. It's a hard call. I think part of this might be a 3D render or something. I can see like the ZBrush like scraping on the model for the tree within the background, especially up in here. So this might be a mix between 3D paint and a 3D scene. But it's got a lot of painterly elements to it. Anyway, so this is what I think my middle gray is at. And when I open up my shot, look how unbelievably dark that is, right? So that is a really, really dark middle gray over here, even darker over here, almost pure black. And then we should go even further black. So that's pretty surprising. I know it's a small little thing to be able to see. I wish I could make the color picker a little bit larger on the screen, but let's do that one more time just so you understand what I'm doing. So inside the red circle, that's what I'm establishing as being the heat zone, the hottest point within my image where the most light is hitting. Outside of that red zone, we've got the orange circle, and in there is where I can generally find my middle tone. And that middle tone is going to be one of these grays. And when I look at it, I see one, a little bit darker one, a black one, a sort of lighter one. And I'm erring on the side of the lighter gray. That's so many subtle little color variations going on within this region here. That's what makes me think it's 3D. Most artists usually don't have that much layering and scraping and stuff going on. So that's what I'm going to establish as the middle gray, something right up on here. But as I move over, right, away outside of that orange circle, same kind of looks like the same visual gray, but it's not. It's one step down, closer to the bottom left-hand side, which is pure black. And now as I move into those pure blacks, there we go. In this section right here, I'll move my mouse around a little bit. It's almost pure black, but then as we move just a little bit further away, it's going to go even further down. So what I'm trying to explain here is that there's a lot of subtlety of light and shade going on within this painting. What I want you guys to do, find that middle tone. And then from there, you're going to start blocking in your form. Sketch it. You can have a sketch in a color. Got some big old roots going on here. Staying really, really loose, using my brackets on my keyboard right now just to be able to start blocking in some of these forms and some of these shapes. Yeah, brand, I'm basically just doing a one-for-one. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I just want to be able to show you what this looks like. I do love painting rocks and I love painting trees. All right, there we go. That's an interesting tree shape. It looks like a three-legged person sitting down. So anywho, now I'm just going to use my magic wand tool. Select on the inside of this area. On each one of them, holding down Shift to get multiple selections. I'm going to go to my selection, modify, and expand. I'm not too concerned at this first stage with really trying to block in any kind of texture, color, or anything like that. I just want to establish that middle tone. Okay, so we are starting with a middle gray as the background, our plate, and you can see how far back we're already starting to work with this gray tone that we're working with. Now, from there, the next step, once you've got your middle gray, is going to be able to go in and you want to, from your reference image, that was our middle gray, find the first sort of shadow pass color that you see here. So if that's our middle gray, what's a color that's sort of next to it, but not a pure black, but a little bit darker? Let's go right here. That's pretty good. All right. So I'm trying to find not the pure black that we saw all the way over on the left-hand side, really far removed from the from where all the light is within the scene, but a step down within the shading. So I've got my layer selected by holding down Control and double clicking on the icon within the layers panel. I'm going to create a new layer on top, and I want to start at this stage at like 56%, so have some wiggle room to be able to bring up my values. I don't want to get too close within my painting at this stage. I still want to work really far back. I'm also using a textured brush while I do this. Zoom back a little bit more. And I'm working really far, really large, just to be able to generally block in some of these shapes and forms. Now, because it's on 50%, that means I get 2 swipes to be able to get to the pure black color that I created a moment ago. I've got my screen touch on tonight, so it might be jumping around a little bit. But anyway, so there we go. We're just sort of half chance. I'm thinking about the lighting. I know that I've got this heat spot, just like within the painting over the left-hand side, that we're going to work through. Now, in your own painting, you're going to want to go through and establish the color blocking for all objects within your scene. The image on the left-hand side, the little kid sitting on the tree, Bran the Builder, he would be a different layer. The the three-eyed raven, I would most likely probably put him, or the pieces of his skin that are exposed and not stuck inside the tree, I would find a middle tone for him and put that on a separate layer as well. Same thing goes for the background elements. I know that within this shot over here on the left-hand side, the majority of the background is black. So I think it's fine within this case. I would approach it this way. You can see that there are roots and there is a ground space. So I'm not going to put the entire thing in black. But from there, I would go through on the roots within the background and find, again, thinking about where is that middle gray color. I'm at 50% here with the roots within the background. And just starting to sketch those into the shot. Now, these roots within the background, what this artist did that's really cool is they do a nice job of providing some good flow, some good line energy for the rest of this piece. It's really successful. And we got roots on the other side. Now, again, this is my middle tone for this thing. So I'm going to end up going in and doing a shadow pass on these roots, even within the background. But we're starting to get pretty close. And now we've got a whole bunch of wood chips and all kinds of other things on the ground also within this shot. Let me zoom in so you can really see what I'm looking at here. This stuff on the ground. So how to be able to approach that. This is the cool part about this technique, right? That's a really noisy image with a lot of highlights, a lot of little brushwork and things like that, but it doesn't matter. I'm still looking for that middle tone. So our eyes, if you're not an artist, you're going to see the highlights first. We want to look past that and look for what is the middle tone within this shot. And that's my middle tone for these wood chips down here at the bottom. So that is considered a separate element within this scene. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to create a new layer. Start blocking in those wood chips. Where they're going to be, they're going to go to black here in a second. There we go. So just blocking in where those wood chips are going to be, just giving them a quick layer. And then on each one of these sections, right? So I'm sort of establishing different regions and giving them their own layers within my shot. Once I complete that base coat, that middle tone for all the objects within my scene, then I can go back and I can start working on the shadow pass, which is what you saw me doing with the tree. Back to our tree. So we just did our first shadow pass down from our middle tone. From here, I can go into my darker tones. So we're going to go middle tone, one step down, and then into our deep blacks within the shot. Once again, I'm going to turn my opacity down to like maybe 37% is usually a pretty good one for me to be able to work with. And I'm going to be doing the deep shadows on a new layer. So we've got base color, first shadow step, and then the third one into the darkness. And keep in mind that this is at 37%, so this is not the pure shadow color. I can definitely turn on my weighted opacity as well as the weighted brush tip. And now I'm thinking about that lighting coming from the top right-hand side and how that's going to be wrapping around each one of these roots. You notice I'm not zooming in on my composition. I'm still staying really, really far out here. Haven't zoomed in yet at all because this is all still working extremely loose. I'm not using fuzzy brushes yet. I'm using hard-edged brushes while I'm painting. They are textured, but it is not the spray can brush. I cannot stand it when I see students in the advanced classes still shading in their backgrounds with just the fuzzy brush. Like the fuzzy brush is cool for polish right at the very end and sort of large color adjustments. We'll see. I'll use it here on this tree once we start to move into the highlights and show you where it can come in handy. But for the most part, that fuzzy brush is just going to make your stuff look a little bit cheap and not all that nice. So 37%, holding my brush really lightly to the canvas and the screen, I'm able to start building up some really nice tones here. Notice I'm working fast. I'm working my entire tree. Once I get done with that first shadow pass, I would go through and do my second shadow pass on, or my first shadow pass on all the other objects within my scene. That means that next up, usually I work from the back to the front is my reasoning for how I like to do these. There's a good middle tone for the wood chips. So there's my wood chip pass, and now I'm going to go through and let's turn this sucker way up. That's the off. There it is. Wood chips. That's pretty annoying. Having to draw all that noise in there. So this is a good example of when a textured brush can really come in handy. Let's see what we have. Scribble. That'll do it. All right, saving myself a lot of time. That one's not too dark. I think I can go quite a bit darker on those wood chips. So let's go in with our third pass on the wood chips. Something a little bit more hair stubbles. Yep, I think that's where we want to be. Different sizes. That's starting to look pretty obvious and not really in perspective. That's okay. Okay. So just creating some good visual noise here. And if you find a brush that is working for you, if it doesn't say, wood chips on the brush, but it's called hair stubbles, don't get stuck on that. If it works, it works. Just going in and darkening up the stuff that's not really, that's in shadow within the shot. There we go. Starting to bring us back to that line art project here. And that's the goal, right? That these lessons that we're learning from each one of the previous projects are going to feed into the new stuff, new things that we're working on. All right, I think I'm in a pretty good spot now to add simpler overall shading and shadow to this. And you can see how we're blending those wood chips in with the rest of our shot. And we haven't even touched our highlights yet. So those are my 2 shadow passes on those wood chips. And once we get the highlights in there, they're going to pop out quite a bit more. And we should be able to create a texture pretty similar to what we're seeing on the right-hand side once we slow down and get those highlights in there a little bit better. Okay, so you've gone through on every object that you've identified within your shot. You've done your first shadow pass, maybe your second shadow pass, but we haven't touched the light yet. That's the important thing. Now we're going to change our approach, holding down Control, selecting the icon within my layers to be able to isolate that layer. Got my deep dark shadow pass, and on top of all those, I'm going to start with my highlights. Now, with the highlight pass, you do not want to go to the brightest spot within your scene first. Just like we did with the shadows, we want to work our way there a little bit more slowly. And this 4 pass thing that we're doing can really, really work very nicely for getting you pretty far within these projects. This is still the initial stages. There's always going back and refining these things and getting tighter with it, zooming in ×2 and doing it, pixel by pixel while you're working through this stuff. Let's go to 53%. That'll work. And now we can start to slow down on these highlights. So I don't want to drown myself within the tree forms doing every little small highlight on this tree. So I'm going to bring my opacity down to like 12%. And let's start doing just some big blocking first, for where those highlights are going to appear. And then I can up my opacity and start making some choices. But this is hopefully, how they showed you within some of those early drawing classes on how to be able to work your way into developing a pretty good rendering. Do it in stages. So after I do this, there we go. I love it when we happy mistakes. I'm starting to shrink down my my brush size with the brackets on the keyboard as I get further away, just to be able to get those gnarly little roots and some of those details that are going to be further back that are going to start to show up. All right, so we're still turned way down. We're at like 12% opacity is what I'm painting with, and you can see how much that is starting to change the tree. So there it is, the before. Here it is, the after. That highlight is starting to come into focus. So I'm going to turn it up now to 50% now that we've done that first pass. You can do this on a new layer if you feel nervous about it. That's the great part about working in Photoshop. And just working our way through. So I still want to, I'm working fast. I'm not, my pen is not moving slow. And I'm making choices. I'm trying to mess with the weight of these lines, and I'm trying to give these lines that I'm creating some good energy. You do that by having the weighted brush turned on, not going to 100% with the brush brightness, and just sort of exploring it. All right, so we're starting to get some fairly interesting things here on this tree. Tree, waterfall, rock. any type of material that you can paint, you can get away with 90% of the drawing process by working in this manner. All right, so we want this spot here to be getting into quite a bit more brightness. Let's just be bold. We said we want this is where the highlights, the main heat source within the shot is going to be. I'm not doing an old man or a figure in this. I'm just trying to show you how to be able to work your way in. So I did one pass working all the way through the tree. And now we're starting to get the highlight. Oops, that's too big. In there. All right, and now, once you go through and do that highlight pass, that first highlight pass through your entire shot, then you're going to create a whole new layer. And that, my friends, is when we go in and we do our fine tuning, our final bright highlight pass. Now, check this out. Even one of the brightest points within this reference image over on the left-hand side, I want you to notice that that is not pure white, okay? That is living sort of right, if you divide this, it's about 1/6, 1/4 of the way up from pure white. That's a little bit higher. That's a little bit higher. Brand the Builder, let's see his eyes, still not pure white. So this is why pulling those colors from your reference images are going to be so important in helping you guys see within the color picker and the color wheel for how these values really operate. And that even when you're doing the brightest section within your shot in your scene, that it's not pure white. With this process, you're going to see how much tone, value, depth you can create within these shots from working in the deep blacks and the grays. And it's my goal that I hope that this influences you guys when it comes to your color choices, the way that you're picking and using color and painting light within your scenes, to not go for the neon colors on the far right-hand side, to be okay and comfortable with working in these deep darks at first into the brighter, more saturated colors. So now, as we start to zoom back relatively quickly, we've got a really, really strong highlight that's starting to hit on that tree on the right-hand side. This is the way to get there, right? It's got good depth, it's got good value, that very flat tree from before. So let's, just to be able to run back through it one more time. We blocked in our tree shape. You're going to go through, you're going to block in all your shapes. You can have a sketch over top that you block in underneath. That's totally fine. So we'll color this layer green for the beginning. From there, we go through and we do our first shadow pass. So let's go with blue, all right, a little bit darker color. And then from there, we do our deep shadow pass on top of that. Let's make that one purple so we know it's a little bit darker. Now from there, we're going to go in and we're going to do our highlights. So at first, you're going to do just a first pass on your highlights. So it's orange. And then you go back and then you do your super bright highlight pass. So it's yellow, right? Those are the super brights. And this is the order for all the objects within your scene to be able to work your way through this. From there, you'll be in a pretty good spot to where you can start making adjustments to each one of these layers. So right now I'm on the flat color from the original, from where I began at, and I'm using the dodge tool. Look at that. And what the dodge tool is, it's going to lighten things. You also have the burn tool within here. If you overuse either of these tools, people will be able to tell, and it's going to make your artwork look cheap. Don't do that. But we've got the burn tool here and the dodge tool. The dodge tool brings you closer to white, the burn tool to the darker tones. So I'm just going to go in and use that dodge tool on that base layer. And now all of a sudden, I'm starting to bring up some of those underlying tones and values that we've been creating before in those glazes, oops, that I've been making. Be able to find all kinds of new stuff within this tree that wasn't there before. Off click, and now look at it, right? I should have duplicated it before I did that. I'm sorry. So that I could show you the before and after. But you can go back and start making adjustments to those layers that you had previously. And just like a sculptor, pushing and pulling some of those elements. So if you feel like something is just standing out too much, not dark enough, you want to drop it back a little bit more, you can do that and do some more changes and tweaks. Because you're going to discover things as you're going through and painting this. You're going to start off and then keep that editor's eye throughout your scene. Let me zoom in on this tree on the right-hand side. And this is what we've been able to create. So pretty cool looking fire, pretty cool looking bark scene. Could it work as water? Could it work as some kind of mystical thing that's happening, the flow of spirit? I don't know. But I do know that it's beautiful to look at. And it's pretty to look at because I've gone through it. I've layered this stuff up. It's got a variety of different textures, a good balance of different brush weights and values. And it feels very, very ethereal. It's got a glowing tree now. But yeah, I hope that helps you think about how to be able to work from your reference photos for whatever image it is that you want to be able to create. I'm not saying that you need to keep your reference photo this large. It can be tiny over on the left-hand side, but that is the process for pulling your colors from any type of reference image, whether it's in color or it's in black and white. Look for that middle tone, go into the shadows, then work your way into the highlights. And you will be surprised how much better of an artist you become very quickly by truly studying these reference digital illustrations and paintings rather than trying to do all this stuff out of your mind. I still think this is a 3D model, especially with some of that stuff right there, but it will inspire you. And once you start looking through each one of these steps and really studying what the shadow pass looks like, what is the shape language within the shadow pass on this reference illustration, what do the highlights look like? This is going to start to create a visual library within your brain and hand memorized patterns, whatever we want to call it, for you to be able to paint more successfully and to be a stronger painter, whether it is a gnarly tree that's glowing in the woods, whether it's a rock, whether it is, a human figure, an old man that you're painting. This type of studying is what's going to really help you become a great digital artist down the line. I've been doing this stuff for a long time now, and don't get away from those references. There's always something to learn from really using those reference images. I'm going to pause this one now. I think we're at a good stopping point for this particular lesson, and we might do a second one tonight to talk about how I'm going to approach setting up my project. But for now, thanks for checking this out. I hope this was helpful for you guys.